The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
October 25th, 2020, episode 20, season 2 of the Barney and Clyde podcast. Quite a lineup today. In family disagreements, we're going to look at the dissing of Ron Paul within Libertarian ranks, which Clyde gave me a heads up on that, and I found it rather surprising. I thought all types of libertarians just venerated him. But anyway, the hyperbolic chamber, we're going to look at Joe Biden's radical energy views and what they portend for his campaign in its final days. And in the Great American Speeches series, we're going to look at A Time for Choosing by Ronald Reagan, which first aired October 27th, 1964. So it's coming up on its 56th anniversary, and it's a thunderous speech. Okay, so welcome aboard.
Welcome back to Barney and Clyde, Season 2. I'm Clyde Myers, the Libertarian, and Barney Quick, with me as always, is our conservative voice. So anyone who's new to the show should know that that's the way we approach things. We take some matters on the nation's plate or the world's plate, and we examine them from the libertarian and conservative viewpoints, and a lot of times that results in a lot of Venn diagram overlap, and sometimes there's a little bit of divergence there, but the conversation is always stimulating.
Mm-hmm. And in non-pandemic times, we meet at the Libation Station, which is the bar across the room from my office. And since we've had to do this remotely, we kept alive a custom from those days. We have a libation to wet our whistles as we have our discussion. What you got today, Clyde?
Oh, well, I guess I'll start. You were telling me you had a doozy, so maybe it'll headline. But so I've got I had to see how can I outdo Barney, not knowing what he's come up with. But I've got the classic Bell's Best Brown, probably
good one,
the best brown ale I think on the market. I also have a Bell's Two Hearted Ale.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is a lot of craft beer. Well, they won't float.
Okay.
But a lot of craft beer snobs will probably call this blasphemy.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to pour maybe a third of a glass, fourth of a glass of the Two Hearted. I'm going to top it off with the best brown.
Oh, I want the brown float on top of the...
Oh. Okay, well, that's an interesting question, because the brown ale, this particular brown ale is like a carbonated regular old beer, right? So you just, they carbonated it. I think they force air carbonate these things with carbon dioxide, obviously.
Okay.
When they bottle it. When you make a black and tan, you're using typically Guinness or Murphy's Stout or something like that will float on the top. But that gas is nitrogen. It's like nitrogen, mostly nitrogen. It's like a blend, but it's mostly nitrogen. So that makes it much more light, I guess, and it floats on the top. And not all nitrogen beers will float on a carbonated beer, but for the most part, I don't know how you keep two carbonated beers from separating.
Okay.
So tell us what you've got. You've got something.
All right. Well, last week was a milestone birthday for me. I turned 65, and on my birthday, I had been out running errands, and I came home and found this on my doorstep.
Oh, yeah. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
For everyone listening on the audio only, it's a bottle of Glenlivet 15, single malt. So there was a card with it, and my nephew and his wife and their son and dog signed the card, and it said, "Happy birthday, Uncle Barney," and so forth. And I sent them a thank you, and I texted my sister and said, "Do you know anything about this?" And she said, "Yeah, Charlie told me he was going to come down to Columbus and deliver a package," which indeed he did. And I mean, is that a nephew or what? Talk about thoughtful. Yeah, that's good stuff, man.
I'm getting into it here, and Just the thing to ward off the chill of a late Sunday afternoon in late October, as we discuss.
Yeah, that's going to warm you right up.
Yeah. Okay.
I like the sound of that cork popping too. That's good stuff.
So yes, I'm getting into that now, and
oh man, that's a thing of beauty right there. Oh, do you take it neat?
yeah.
Oh, good for you, good man.
Yeah, no rocks, no water.
Yeah, don't ruin a good scotch.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So,
Little rocks now and then on a whiskey I like, but not scotch.
Yes.
That looks nice.
Oh, entirely too long.
All right. Well, we better get through this before we both get hammered. So, but happy birthday, man! It's been a pleasure knowing you all these years, and I'm sorry that now you have to deal with Medicare and all that nonsense. But happy birthday.
BNC viewers may note that I alluded last time to a piece I'd written at my Substack page, Precipice, a piece called Healthcare Thoughts. And I was reflecting on getting ready to turn 65 and how government was going to be much more involved in my healthcare and everything. And so those who are interested can check that out. Well, anyway, our first segment, I'm going to let you kind of lead because you apprised me of this, and like I say, I was frankly a little surprised. I didn't know that there were elements within libertarianism that had cast aspersions on Dr. Paul.
That should come as a surprise, like there are some heroes that are just maybe off limits in some circles. I don't know who would be the conservative equivalent. Like who's one of those people within conservatism that you just don't criticize?
The great Ronald Reagan.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we've got segments on each of them, and there's some parallels. As a matter of fact, I think they thought well of each other. Such an overarchingly conservative figure, and in your case, such an overarchingly libertarian figure that, he covers everybody in our movement, doesn't he? And that's kind of the...
Yeah, and so what I've been noticing lately is that I wouldn't be a libertarian if it wasn't for Dr. Ron Paul. I mean, let's just put that out there. I'm not making the case that he's a perfect libertarian or that he should be a large L libertarian, as in a member of the Libertarian Party. He's affiliated with the Republican Party, or was during most of his
He's gone back and
career.
forth over the years between Libertarian and Republican.
Well, I wouldn't say he's gone back and forth. He did run as a libertarian in the 80s. And he's endorsed a libertarian candidate for Senate once, I think. But he joined the Libertarian Party, and then I think he didn't find the usefulness in it. And I don't think a person has to find the usefulness in the Libertarian Party in order to be a libertarian and be important to the movement and to the philosophy. I don't think
he comes by his libertarianism, sort of like you, if I'm not mistaken. He was finishing up his medical residency and started reading Friedrich Hayek's Road to Serfdom, which then led him to von Mises, which led him to Murray Rothbard, and so forth.
Yeah, him and Rothbard, that's some of the critique of Dr. Paul within the movement, which is, to me, it just seems like if there was a couple of people who would be, and I don't want to say untouchable, and I kind of think that sometimes that hero worship is misguided. I know. We're all fallible beings. We're all fallible beings, and we're all going to be disappointed if we hold a human being up as this pinnacle example of perfection.
Right.
We're never going to be satisfied with that. And I'm not trying to make the case that Dr. Paul is perfect. Again, I don't know. I'm not going to spend my time going back and researching every paper he's ever written, every candidate he's ever endorsed. All I'm going to do is say that a lot of people are like me, and they remember Ron Paul running for president in 2008 and 2012 and having the guts to stand up to all of the establishment, not only in the opposing party but in his own party, and take all the flack from his own party, and to defend peace, personal sovereignty, and individualism, and free market economics. He's the only one that would do that And it was super, super brave. And it gave people like me who were feeling politically homeless some hope that there's people out there that think like me. I want people to be able to be free to live their own lives. I want them to be able to marry whoever they love. I want them to be able to, it's like the old libertarian T-shirt that says, I want gay married couples to be able to defend their marijuana fields with AR-15s. But we also want a balanced budget. We want low or no taxation. We want the free market to be free and unrestricted. We want sound economic decisions, and Dr. Paul gave people a political home in libertarianism, not the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, Lord knows I make a clear distinction between conservatism and the Republicans.
Yeah,
I don't really feel like a Republican anymore. But anyway, so to the point, are there magazine pieces coming out, or did somebody make a speech, or what form does this dissing of Ron Paul take?
It seems to have been in vogue over the last few years to disparage Ron Paul for some reason within the Libertarian Party. And I think that this has occurred since the rise of the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, okay.
The Mises Caucus could easily be called the Libertarian Party Libertarian Caucus, because they are trying to steer the party in a libertarian direction, a very libertarian direction. I'm a member of the Mises Caucus, and proudly so, but a lot of people don't like libertarian purity, and I can understand that, and I think that that's a valid opinion. I don't share it, but I understand it, and I welcome those people into the party. I don't think that they should be removed, as some of them think that the Mises crowd should be removed. So anyway, this caucus has gained a lot of power in the last few years. It's about 3 or 4 years old, and in that time, they've really increased the party membership, because actual libertarians are joining now. Not that the other people aren't actual libertarians, but people who are very libertarian, who viewed the Libertarian Party before as something that wasn't attractive to them, are now seeing it and going, okay, now I've got a home. And these people are pretty high on the Ron Paul fanboy scale,
Okay, all right.
And because they like the pure message, we interviewed Jacob Hornberger.
Yeah, here on BNC, he was
Yeah.
our guest back when he was during the primary
And
phase.
Hornberger was the pick from the Mises Caucus. That's what the one that's the candidate that the Mises Caucus endorsed.
Okay.
So anyway, that's happened with the help of a couple of podcasters and media personalities like Tom Woods and Dave Smith, even maybe Michael Malice to some degree, who have been interviewing the Mises Caucus leadership and really getting behind a really pure libertarian message, and it's pissing a lot of people off in the party. And since these are the people who got brought into the party by Ron Paul, inadvertently I might add, Ron Paul didn't say you should go join the Libertarian Party. Quite the opposite, He didn't mention the Libertarian Party. I never heard him mention the Libertarian Party when he was running for president in 2008 and 2012. He ran on the Republican ticket. He talked about being a libertarian, small L libertarian, but not a member of the Libertarian Party. So anyway, some of these people, like Tom Woods, they get a little bit of crap a lot of crap from some of the former party leadership and a lot of people within the party, because the former chair of the Libertarian Party, a guy named Nicholas Sarwark, who I've not met, and I'm not going to talk ill of him, or I'm not going to promote him. I don't know him. I'm not really that impressed as from when he was chair.
Okay.
But that's more than I've done for the party, so I'll just shut up on the matter.
Okay.
He's been very critical of Ron Paul and very critical of Tom Woods and those kinds of people, I think because they're not constantly screaming with their hair on fire about racism and bigotry like an insane liberal, neoliberal.
Interesting. I didn't know that there was a wing of libertarianism preoccupied with identity politics.
There is.
Okay.
And if they're former lefties, like myself,
Okay.
like I don't understand why I left the left because I couldn't take that shit anymore.
Yeah.
I'm
okay.
surprised that people who left the left want to bring that with them, but some do. And again, I'm also against racism. I'm against bigotry and things like that.
Well, who isn't? I mean, for heaven's sake.
Yeah. Like, let's be grown-ups here. But
Right.
but because Sarwark had put out a letter, like denouncing racism within the Libertarian Party, and an open invitation for all racists to leave. Right? And so Woods wouldn't sign it, and a bunch of other people wouldn't sign it, and a lot of people took that as an endorsement that I'm not gonna be against bigotry and racism. But really, what it was I am going to be firmly against virtue signaling that doesn't change anything or make anything better.
I've always called that the great cultural dare. Unless you express the matter our way, then you're open to charges of being a bigot.
Right. Whenever,
Yeah.
if you don't sing when we crank the hurdy-gurdy, then you don't get
Right.
your supper, monkey. Like
Yeah.
it makes my blood boil, and I'm so glad that there are people that are brave like Tom Woods that just go like, you know what? No, I'm not going to sign your stupid virtue signaling letter. Go to hell.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that. It was just like silence. It's like I'm not going to sign it. I'm busy, and this doesn't matter. Like this
But
doesn't.
his silence spoke volumes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. To a bunch of people who aren't important and need to virtue signal.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point is, I think that all this is coming from the people that came to the Libertarian Party because Ron Paul introduced them to liberty. Because those people are becoming powerful and are getting louder voices, then they have to cut that head of the hydra off. They have to discredit the shepherd in order to disperse the sheep, I think.
Okay.
So anyway, here's what happened. Elizabeth Nolan Brown, who's an editor at Reason Magazine or contributor, I don't know what exactly her whole role is, but she tweeted out on October 24th. She says, Ron Paul brought libertarians a wave of racist dingbats who like liberty in only a few areas from which we are still digging ourselves out. Good the fuck riddance. And
yeah. The libertarian movement and the small L libertarian movement and the large L libertarian party have both begun to see a bit of uptick in interest in them among the general populace, and they can ill afford to have that squelched by this kind of stuff.
I totally agree, and I feel like these people don't ever want to win. I just don't understand why you don't want to grow the party. I don't understand why you don't want to make it bigger, and I don't understand why you want to alienate people and fragment. So let's go to one more here. There's so we talked about Nick Sarwark, the previous chair of the Libertarian Party. Now, mind you, this is a person who said that politics, playing the political game and winning, is more important than purity of message. Okay? He said in a debate that libertarians should get behind Dick Cheney if he were to convert to the Libertarian Party. Not the Libertarian mindset, but the Libertarian Party. We should all get behind, Dick Cheney.
Yeah,
and
I'm a Dick Cheney fan, but I can see what you're saying. He's not a fit.
He's not a fit. No, libertarians are not Dick Cheney fans.
Right.
But so in this debate, his opponent pressed him and said, "Hey, well, okay, what about Hitler? If Hitler was running as a libertarian, should we all rally behind him and elect him?" And this man said, "Yes."
Now that's, oh man, us conservatives are dealing with that because and as a matter of fact, here in the last 10 days, as things reach a fever pitch in the presidential election, the whole business about you'd better get on board with Trump. It's a binary choice. And you'll have Biden instead if you don't. And folks like myself say, Trump is not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. What the hell? I mean,
Yeah. So it's more important to win than to retain your identity of what you want to win for, right? That's the message. So bear that in mind, that this person holds that view when he posts on Facebook, quote, "Lifetime Libertarian Party member Dr. Ron Paul endorsed himself for president in 1988. He endorsed Murray Sabin for Senate in 2018. Are you aware of any other Libertarian candidate endorsements during his political career?" Okay? So that's a challenge by Nick Sarwark, saying that basically that Ron Paul isn't libertarian. This is the guy who's like, you shouldn't say that people aren't libertarian enough. We need a big tent. He's basically saying, well, Ron Paul's not libertarian enough. He's not endorsing our candidates. Well, he is a member of the lifetime member of the party, because you can buy a lifetime membership, right? You can buy a lifetime membership to something and not want it anymore. And I'm sure that's firmly where Ron Paul stands. I'm not speaking for him, but if I were him, I'd probably be like, yeah, I bought this thing in 1988, and now you can shove it where the sun don't shine because the way you people treat me, No wonder he doesn't run on our ticket anymore. Look at how these people treat him. And then it just seems so popular right now within the Libertarian Party to disparage Ron Paul, and to me, it just makes no sense, because there's only one reason they could be doing it. This is the deplorables moment inside the Libertarian Party. They're calling the Ron Paul people the deplorables. You're right. These are the untouchables because Ron Paul.
They really mean all that stuff about no taxes and
right. Like, what happens if people actually have to be forced to live under the non-aggression principle? Yeah, what happens if drugs actually get fully decriminalized, But anyway, I really feel that anyone who's doing this, who's going after the people who were brought into the party by Ron Paul or by Tom Woods or the Mises Caucus, by going after those people, they can only be doing that with malicious intent to fragment the party and to make it weaker. They're not the ones that want a big tent. So it's going to end up making the party weaker, which is already happening.
Well, it's really sad, because as a conservative, I can say forthrightly, there's a lot to admire about Ron Paul. For crying out loud, it's not like he doesn't know the outer world beyond libertarian. He served in the U.S. Air Force. He was a flight surgeon, and he's a captain in the U.S. Air National Guard. And so, I mean, he knows from the inside, and that's kind of Jacob Hornberger does too. Remember, we had that conversation with him. He knows from the inside what the military impetus is all about. I mean, and he and then, like I say, when he was a resident, kind of like the way I came by conservatism too. You start reading one compelling author, which leads you to another, and leads you to another, and say, man, this is a coherent worldview. I think I resonate with this. I'm going to explore it further. I think that, along like Dr. Paul, that's how you came to libertarianism.
Yep, and not just me, but like tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
you know, and the only
They're
again,
looking for a home.
the only
Not,
reason that I honestly, because
not
how old is Dr. Paul right now? Like 84,
85. He was born.
85. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is an older guy. He's not out actively campaigning against the Libertarian Party. I follow the Liberty Report, and I don't Google Ron Paul every day and find out what he's up to, but
Yeah.
I keep in touch.
Hmm.
But I don't hear him out there talking crap about the Libertarian Party every day. But the Libertarian Party is constantly talking crap about Dr. Paul, and it's gross,
Yeah.
So, and the only reason that they could be doing it and bringing it up now, this guy is, what, 10, 15 years retired from government?
Yeah.
He's not out there kicking the beehive against the liberty movement. He's still strongly supporting it well into his 80s. You know what I mean? The guy is a champion inside the freedom movement. Give him a little friggin' credit already.
Exactly. It's dismaying to hear this, Clyde. But these are times in which any movement with cohesion that you try to foster seems to crack right back up again.
Yeah. And I love the Libertarian Party, and I love the way it's sort of small and punk rock, and I love that it's, just kind of cool and niche and all that kind of stuff. But, like, I also want to live in a free world,
Yeah, that's the ultimate reason you're part of it.
And and it's cute and all that, but we can't, if we're going to be a band, we can't keep playing in the basement and the garage all the time. We've got to get out there, you know what I mean, and make a bigger splash.
Yeah.
Let's grow this thing, and let's bring people into the fold and teach them about freedom and about liberty. Right?
Yeah.
And even if Dr. Paul's a garbage human being who should be, swept into the dustbin of history, as they say, if he brought 10,000 people in here into the movement, and now they're sponges ready to listen closer to the message, then you just give them the message. Don't sit there and talk about how they were wrong to follow Ron Paul out of the desert. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just, they're here now.
Okay.
All right. We beat that one to death enough, you think?
Yeah, I think so. Probably time to move to segment 2, which is one we've had for a long time. The Hyperbolic Chamber, Joe Biden's radical energy views and what they portend for his campaign in the final days. Now, most of the journalistic coverage of what's happening on that front in the last few days, particularly since the last presidential debate, has to do with how's it affecting his prospects. A couple of things about that. One, it is going to damage it somewhat because the focus, and understandably so, is on how people in energy-producing states, oil states like Oklahoma and Texas, gas states like Pennsylvania and West Virginia and upstate New York, coal states like Kentucky, and people working in those industries in those states are saying, this guy's talking about endangering my job, and that's where the rubber hits the road. That's what it does come down to, especially in the very final days of a campaign when any remaining undecided voters are what's going to tip the balance for me. And Selena Zito, for instance, who writes now for the Washington Examiner, she's been at various places. I think her home base is Pennsylvania. She sure writes about it a lot. But her shtick has kind of been Eastern Midwest and Western East, Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio and West Virginia and places like that. What's going on with people in the small towns and Rust Belt stuff and energy industry stuff? And she's got a piece at the talking about how people in a particular region of Pennsylvania in the coal mining industry are indicating strongly that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. There's a piece from the Los Angeles Times about backlash from what he had to say at the debate, and how politically damaged, and Washington Post analysis, how politically damaging were Biden's comments about closing on the oil industry. Some of this stuff's behind a paywall. I'm not getting to read it again, but
I hate that.
Unless
it's my paywall.
Okay. The point being, objective analysis is indicating that it's gonna hurting somewhat. That's not what I'm mainly interested in. Being like you, someone whose main interest is in freedom and making sense and formulating policy according to reality and things like that. You look into. I did that. Lord knows I'm no Trump fan, but he did pretty much hit a home run with his when this came up at their last debate. And I never said I wasn't against fracking, and Trump showed a video to prove that. Oh yes, you did. And the larger point, there's a couple of levels of this, but the larger point is the climate alarmism movement has a vested interest in showing that anything like fracking or even nuclear energy is bad. We've got to go with renewable stuff like wind and solar. They go for the most hard to harvest, expensive, and diffuse forms of energy, when it's obvious that the densest and most readily extractable and cheapest, because of those things, has to be the way we go.
They're against everything that works worth a damn.
And then it even gets to a deeper level, and this is where you and I really agree. Energy is provided by particular companies that were formed by stockholders who said, hey, I think I could get a return on investment by being an owner of this company that's going to provide energy of a particular type to people. I'll bet it'll be profitable, and I'll bet it'll heat a lot of homes. And the energy sector consists of particular companies providing particular energy forms to particular customers for a price that both buyer and seller think is acceptable, think they're getting value from. And
well, there's a
government getting involved in that gets it back to some kind of macro level, like, okay, go ahead, Clyde.
Well, let me make some more. If I didn't make enough libertarian enemies in the Ron Paul segment, let me make a few more.
Okay, sure.
And maybe some friends too. Who knows? I think that there's a libertarian fraction here, or like a fracture here, because there's a case to be made that the best sources of energy are the ones that are inexpensive, reliable, and keep little old ladies warm in the winter and cool in the summer, right?
Yeah.
And keep people from dying from climate. Because if you look at the numbers of deaths from the climate, you'll see that they've been plunging for years. And the reason that they've been plunging, even if you're the hair on fire climate alarmist, you have to recognize the fact that technology has eased the pain of those situations. Right?
Sure, and extracting things like coal and oil is done much more cleanly than it was just a few years ago.
And I think it's better handled by the private sector and all that kind of good stuff. But I do think that there is an argument to be made that the externalities, such as the pollution created by fossil fuels, does create a it's sort of a NAP violation. It's like an initiation of force, or at least negligence, against other people who have to deal with the downstream pollution. I'm using downstream figuratively, but that could also be literal in some cases. But I think that our society is so much better from having inexpensive, reliable energy at the disposal of people in all economic classes in our country, that the externalities are bearable.
Yeah.
But we should be working to diminish them, because they're not going to be bearable forever.
Right. But any private organization, that is to say a company in the business of providing energy, can see that its profitability is best protected by addressing that kind of thing.
Maybe it is. I mean, people certainly don't do that in the meat industry. Like when people go to buy a roll of sausage, they buy the cheapest one or the one that they think is tastiest. They don't really think about the impact of, well, was this on a CAFO type farm or was this on? Some people make that purchasing decision, but very few do. Most people make a product quality or price decision, and again, I'm not saying that the government should control it. I'm just saying that there are other factors at play. But let's pull it back to Biden, and so he's got to. What I find interesting about the Biden campaign is that both the left and the right are saying, well, let's get behind Biden, not the whole right, but like the never Trumpers and the garbage human beings like Bill Weld.
Please let me just real quickly. Your intrepid co-host here inhabits an ever narrower sliver of terrain, ideological terrain of real estate, because I am a never Trumper, but I sure as hell am not one of these Lincoln Project people that says, since it's a binary choice, you gotta vote for Biden. Not.
Yeah, you're not a never Trumper. You're like a better Trumper. Like, fine, Trump, but just make him better. Like, you know.
I probably won't vote for Trump, Clyde. I'm probably going to write somebody in. Anyway, but let's get back to Biden.
Yes. So I just want to make one point about Biden is that the people on the right who are slipping away from Camp Trump, and the people on the left who wouldn't be so pro Biden, maybe some people who are a little further left than Biden, are saying, well, let's get behind this candidate because he's more of a centrist, and let's return to normal, right? The right thinks that the never Trumpers think that Biden is more sort of that Reagan kind of person, and then the far left thinks that, well, Biden's closer left than we had before, so let's return to zero and then start working outward from there. And we're talking about these radical energy policies, which shows me that that's not the case. This guy is not a return to, well, he may be a return
decency and normality and comity and moderation.
Right. Maybe he's a return to normalcy, but normalcy is not not liberty. It's not freedom, and it's not, it's not peace and harmony and flowers and unicorns. And
let's go to the record book. In 2019, at a campaign stop in Peterborough, New Hampshire, he said that we need to hold fossil fuel executives liable for what they've done, particularly in those cases where they are where there are underserved neighborhoods. Lovely leftist phrase. And everybody talks about, oh, it's so frightful at Trump rallies when people start screaming, lock him up, lock her up, lock them up. Back to that campaign stop in late 2019, Biden said, when the fossil fuel executives don't deliver, put them in jail. He's on record saying this.
Put them in jail for what? For not giving product to people who didn't pay for it?
Exactly.
Or for not building pipeline, or not building a delivery mechanism for people. Like, if you produce gas, do you have to make, like, the people who extract gas from the ground and the people who extract oil and the people who refine oil aren't the people who bring it to my house.
Right.
What the hell is he talking about? Who's going to jail for what?
Yes, I know, but well, and that's the nature of our times. The Trumpists do this with their lock him up, lock her up over email stuff that everybody thinks ought to be at the front and center on our radar screens, and that's a whole other issue. But the left also has its thing. Because the air is ostensibly dirtier, which it's not. But excuse me,
they should all be locked up. But none of these people. All these people should be locked up, but none of them for the reasons that people want them locked up. Hillary Clinton should absolutely spend the rest of her life in jail for destabilizing the country of Libya and costing thousands of lives and completely ruining the lives of other peoples for generations to come. Not for putting some fucking emails on a server in her closet, which was negligent and stupid and probably prosecutable. But Jesus Christ, this woman is a murderer. She should spend the rest of her life at the Hague for the murders.
but to get back to the, I don't disagree, but to get back to the point, there is no way for years, for decades, for solar and wind to compete in a free marketplace with dense forms of energy like coal and oil. There's not. Without subsidies, they basically cannot exist. And this whole business of Biden saying the federal government ought to have a policy of net zero and ending fossil fuels by 2050, you can't do that without, and here we go, here's our Venn diagram overlap, the government, which has a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, taking our money at gunpoint to put to energy policies. And where is anything? James Madison's rolling over in his grave. Where is there anything about energy policy in the effing Constitution?
Yeah, but let's be fair.
So anyway,
let's be fair. Fossil fuel companies are subsidized too, to a large extent.
And I'm all for having that stop.
I personally think that if you let these two, again, we're getting off topic of Biden, but I think you'll give these two formats the free market and let them compete unsubsidized, unhelped, and uninhibited. One's going to reign supreme, and I kind of feel like the sustainable one's going to win.
Well, that's because our government school system has done such a good job indoctrinating the little kiddies with skulls full of mush into thinking that the planet's in some kind of fucking trouble. And, and that's why polls show that most Americans now, feel that climate change is not being addressed enough, and it's a very urgent issue. And then there's the other one. Now that the COVID thing has come along, they conflate the two. People say, a lot of people are saying, acknowledging is the word I'd use, that we've got a pandemic on our hands, and it's unprecedented, and we don't exactly, we're in uncharted territory, and we ought to proceed carefully, and blah, blah, blah. But then there is also, and it's largely populated by Trumpists, those who say, masks and distancing are silly, and we need to open everything up right now, and blah, blah, blah. And then the leftists have an excuse to say, well, they're anti-science, just like they are on climate. And climate and COVID are two different subjects. Just because something is true in one realm does not mean it holds true in the other realm.
The left wouldn't understand science if it fell out of the sky and hit him in the head.
Yeah.
Like they would. I mean, especially with the mask thing. Again, I don't want to get too far off topic, but the freaking mask thing. Every time I talk to a leftist that is crazy pro-mask, right? They say, okay, well, masks clearly work. Okay, so, fine, show me the evidence. Well, the evidence is you put a mask on your face and look how it disperses all this kind of stuff. Okay, that's one person wearing a mask. Where's your data on all of society wearing a mask all the time? You know what I mean? And people keep it snotty, and they put it in their pocket, and they don't wash it for 2 weeks. Where's the data? Where's the aggregate data and multivariate analysis on all that shit? It's nowhere to be found, and don't try to convince me that it is, because you just haven't produced it, okay?
Yeah.
So go to hell. Sorry about Biden. Oh, and by the way, one thing real quick. I don't know if it was me or Glenn Livett, but we finally got an F-bomb out of Barney. So there's a first here on Barney and Clyde.
I think it was a mixture. But there's this whole political level where, in the aftermath of the last debate, what's happening with Biden's prospects among voters in Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Texas and blah, blah, blah. He has been doubling down since then. He's declared that climate change is the number one issue facing humanity. And he's got a $2 trillion plan. Never mind how we're going to get the money given, our massive debt and deficit to finance that. But on a path to zero carbon pollution for the electricity sector by 2013 and net zero by 2050, unchecked, it is going to bake the planet. No. People, what's been swept under the rug in the last couple of years is all how these computer models have been shown to be horseshit. Nobody remembers the East Anglia emails anymore and the hockey stick and all that. But this stuff's been discredited. The planet is not in such trouble that we need to take urgent action and reverse the advance of reverse human advancement. You know. Anyway.
Well, I think a lot of people realize that, or at least they realize that the existential threat right now is not in their backyards. And I think that the left forgets that they're supposed to be the defenders of the little guy, right? And the little guy is saying that climate change in the big picture is not at my doorstep, but my job is, and heating my home is, and again, you can't hide stuff from people anymore. We have this awesome leveling device called the internet that gives everyone access to all the same information. And you can't hide from the people in Kentucky the fact that the people in California, where they've passed bans on certain types of energy or using certain amounts of hydrocarbon-based energy, that they're constantly experiencing interruptions in service. And not just oops, it's out again, not just incompetence. It's like, okay, we're going to have to plan for the electricity in a major city, a block of the city, to be off from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. or from midnight to 2 a.m. just because we don't have the goddamn electricity. We don't have the energy.
The lights are going off in our neighborhood, and a forest fire up the hill is breathing down our necks because we didn't clear out the underbrush because we were trying to be so environmentally groovy. Yeah.
Right. So you can't say to somebody in Kentucky or Illinois or West Virginia, whatever, like, okay, we want to do all the awesome stuff that we've done for California for you. We'd like to increase homelessness. We'd like to decrease availability of electricity. We'd like you to pay a lot more in taxes. You want to sign up today?
Yeah.
It's not a very compelling argument.
Yeah. I'll just kind of, my final comment is that the great hard leftist Noam Chomsky, professionally he's a linguist at MIT, but for decades he's been a far left firebrand, and he applaudingly says Joe Biden's got the most radical environmental agenda of any Democratic presidential candidate ever, and he's endorsed by the Sunshine Movement, which is this thing that got going in 2017, a bunch of young environmental activists that really love what Biden's proposing. So he's not a moderate, in other words, at least certainly not on energy.
I think, again, we talked about him being rumored to be like a return to normalcy, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, maybe that's the case, but normalcy for a lot of people was real bad.
The Overton window has shifted. We define normalcy differently.
Yeah, and good for Trump. I gotta say, good for Trump, and not necessarily because he tried to do this or because he's competent in some way, but just the simple fact of him going in and he went into the office and he lifted up every rock. You know what I mean? He may have found some gross stuff under some and said, "This is great stuff," but like he exposed all the bad crap. You know what I mean? And now people can see it. And I hope that people can do one of two things, or maybe both. Take the some of the good things that Trump has done, and run with those. And the other things, I hope that they can see that this isn't unique to him. That politics and government, not America, but like politics and government, the true nature of government is shady dealings and backdoor deals and mob shakedowns. And I really hope that people can parse out Trump from that and see, okay, I really hate Trump. I hate all the gross things this guy does. Ooh. Okay, cool, good. I hope you realize that you don't like those things, those actions. And then when Joe Biden gets into office and does those things, I hope you can apply that disgust to him, because you sure as hell didn't apply it to Obama, and you sure as hell didn't apply it to Bush W.
The older I get, the more I love the Who song, "Won't Get Fooled Again." take out my guitar and play, just like yesterday. Then I get on my knees and pray that we don't get fooled again.
There you go.
Yeah. And you know, what you're getting to here, take the best of this and take the best of that. And I realize politics is about building a big enough tent to draw people in to have, you know, it's all about scale and, you know, getting enough heft, enough momentum, enough campaign money, you know, and interest among people. Get some people elected who agree with you on at least, you know, a majority of things and all that good stuff. But there have been times in American history when people of utter, you know, of unshakable principle have stepped up on the stage, and whether you agree with them or not, you have to admire the fact that they believe to the core of their beings.
Is this a segue?
In what they believe. It is.
Oh, right. Very good segue, Barney.
Yeah. We've talked a bit throughout this show. It's come up in both segments so far. Somebody steps up on the stage and says, "I believe this, and therefore you should vote for me." How much do they believe in it, or to what degree are they a phony? The reason Ronald Reagan continues to be such a hero to so many Republicans and conservatives, and let's make a distinction there. Not all conservatives are Republicans, and not all Republicans are conservatives. But the reason he is so admired and remains such a hero is because the guy really believed it. He started out he was an FDR Democrat, you know. Born and raised in Tampico, Illinois, studied economics at what was the name of the college?
Before we go there, why don't you introduce why it's important to talk about Reagan now? What's the occasion that we're celebrating right now?
Yeah, that's a good question, Clyde, and I'm happy to address it. Why is it important to think about Reagan at a moment like this? Because, like I say, there was nothing phony about the guy. And there's everything phony about Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't care about human freedom or human decency or the role of America on the world stage. Donald Trump cares about his own glorification.
So let's roll back in time.
Yeah.
To the campaign of Barry Goldwater.
Yeah.
All right. So we're talking 1964, right?
John F. Kennedy had been assassinated the previous November.
So Barry Goldwater's running for the Republican ticket against the sort of incumbent Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah. America was undergoing a lot of cultural changes. In 1964, the Beatles came to America's shore. The free speech movement out on the Berkeley campus was getting going, so that there were the early rumblings of a counterculture
I like
happening.
Your counterculture dance there.
Yeah.
Shoulder swag.
But that's, I'm kind of setting the scene for what 1964 was like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
well, I wasn't there, so.
Civil rights movement was happening, a number of things like that. Barry Goldwater had written a book in 1960 called The Conscience of a Conservative. He co-wrote it with Brent Bozell, and that had really electrified a certain wing in the Republican Party. So he wound up, as the primary process distilled, as the candidate. And man, Barry Goldwater was really a man of conviction. You couldn't shake him, and which left him open to all kinds of, you know, charges of this and that from the Democrats and other kinds of leftists and so forth. But Ronald Reagan gave this speech in support of Barry Goldwater's campaign in the last weeks of the election cycle. It was late October, and the election was
So the only thing I knew about Barry Goldwater, I was born in 1977, so the only thing I knew about Barry Goldwater really was that Bob Dylan didn't like him, right? In my adult years, I realized that that's probably an indicator that he was onto something. Yeah, Goldwater, not Dylan.
Well, and if you listen to the entire A Time for Choosing speech, which is what we're discussing in this segment, Ronald Reagan takes a little while and says, let's look at who this man Barry Goldwater was and how he flew his private plane up and from California back and forth between there and Phoenix to bring people home to see their
Did that happen? Did that happen because first of all, I want to preface this with that again, like many other people, I really admire a lot of things about Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
He has some hits on his record that I don't admire so much.
Yeah, his foreign policy probably ain't your cup of tea. But.
Well, not all of it. I mean, let's face it, man. Ronald Reagan was instrumental in ending the Cold War. The
Cold War
and bringing peace between the giant superpowers of and probably not so much as Mikhail Gorbachev. Let's give Gorbachev some credit. Like he opened the doors and let the West in and said let's actually make peace for real. And I think Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan deserve an enormous amount of credit for bringing peace to the world.
Yeah.
That's not to say that every foreign policy decision that Reagan made was good, and I don't think he was that good on gun control. But there's a huge amount to admire about the man. So we're talking about on October 27th. That's the following Tuesday. Will be the what anniversary of?
56.
The 56th anniversary of Ronald Reagan's "A Time for Choosing" speech. And
can I just say just a real quick biographical? He was born in this little town of Tampico, Illinois, to a failed alcoholic shoe salesman who had a big heart and did love his family, but had a fondness for
How can you fail at alcoholism? It's so easy.
Yeah. Majored in economics at a small liberal arts college. Went off. He was a sportscaster for WHO, which is a big channel radio station in Des Moines, Iowa. Went out to cover spring training for the Chicago Cubs in Southern California in 1937, and on a lark did a screen test with Warner Brothers, and they said, "Man, you got some acting chops. Let's sign you." And then he began his career, and he was president of the screen. This is the interesting thing. Like I said, he started out as an FDR Democrat. He was a labor union guy. He was the head of the Screen Actors Guild, but and here's where he met his second wife, Nancy. She was an actress, and she sent him a letter saying, "Hey," or called him or something, got in touch with him and said, "I'm getting a bunch of mail that I'm sure is from communist front groups. What can you do about it?" And he looked into it for her, and they started dating and got married and all that.
I'll be darned. I never knew that Nancy was his second wife.
Yeah.
How unconservative.
Maureen. He had his first two kids with Maureen. Maureen was his daughter. What was her name? I'm having a senior moment. But Nancy was his second wife. Ron Jr. and Patty were the kids they had together. But and then he was the host of General Electric Theater on TV in the 1950s, and they started sending him out on the rubber chicken circuit, to tout GE at Rotary clubs around the country and that kind of thing. But he had a conversion, and that really kind of started with this business of communist infiltration of his industry, the film and TV industry. And by the early 60s, he understood that the Democratic Party was headed toward socialism, so he quit. And that sets the table. That's
as someone who has a degree in economics probably would.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wanted to play the first couple minutes of this thing.
Yeah. And then about a minute later, there's this little segment, and then the last 2 minutes are just.
So we're gonna play 2 minutes and 30 seconds of this. There's a couple spots that I want to also highlight, but we'll go through your whole gambit first.
And I hope I don't get too choked up.
The following pre-recorded political program is sponsored by TV for Goldwater Miller on behalf of Barry Goldwater, Republican candidate for President of the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, we take pride in presenting a thoughtful address by Ronald Reagan. Mr. Reagan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you and good evening. The sponsor has been identified, but unlike most television programs, the performer hasn't been provided with a script. As a matter of fact, I have been permitted to choose my own words and discuss my own ideas regarding the choice that we face in the next few weeks. I have spent most of my life as a Democrat. I recently have seen fit to follow another course. I believe that the issues confronting us cross party lines. Now, one side in this campaign has been telling us that the issues of this election are the maintenance of peace and prosperity. The line has been used, we've never had it so good. But I have an uncomfortable feeling that this prosperity isn't something on which we can base our hopes for the future. No nation in history has ever survived a tax burden that reached a third of its national income. Today, 37 cents out of every dollar earned in this country is the tax collector's share. And yet our government continues to spend $17 million a day more than the government takes in. We haven't balanced our budget 28 out of the last 34 years. We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months. And now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce. Foreign dollar claims are $27.3 billion. And we've just had announced that the dollar of 1939 will now purchase 45 cents in its total value. As for the peace that we would preserve, I wonder who among us would like to approach the wife or mother whose husband or son has died in South Vietnam and ask them if they think this is a peace that should be maintained indefinitely. Do they mean peace, or do they mean we just want to be left in peace? There can be no real peace while one American is dying someplace in the world for the rest of us. We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
Okay, so let's move to, do you want to discuss
Yeah,
that?
just about a half minute later at 3:30, we go from 3:30 to 6, which I think is some important
Do you
stuff.
want to discuss that bit any before we move on to that, or?
No, let's let President Reagan go ahead and...
You're so benevolent, Barney.
And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. In this vote harvesting time, they use terms like the Great Society, or as we were told a few days ago by the President, we must accept a greater government activity in the affairs of the people. But they've been a little more explicit in the past, and among themselves, and all of the things I now will quote have appeared in print. These are not Republican accusations. For example, they have voices that say the Cold War will end through our acceptance of a not undemocratic socialism. Another voice says the profit motive has become outmoded. It must be replaced by the incentives of the welfare state. Or our traditional system of individual freedom is incapable of solving the complex problems of the 20th century. Senator Fulbright has said at Stanford University that the Constitution is outmoded. He referred to the President as our moral teacher and our leader. And he says he is hobbled in his task by the restrictions of power imposed on him by this antiquated document. He must be freed so that he can do for us what he knows is best. And Senator Clark of Pennsylvania, another articulate spokesman, defines liberalism as meeting the material needs of the masses through the full power of centralized government. Well, I, for one, resent it when a representative of the people refers to you and me, the free men and women of this country, as the masses. This is a term we haven't applied to ourselves in America. But beyond that, the full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose.
Okay, so let's go to...
The very last one.
Before we do, he calls this a vote harvesting season, you know, or this time of vote harvesting. I just love that wordsmithing. And he says that we're eventually going to have to settle on some form of not undemocratic socialism, as if there's
it's quoting a Democrat.
As if there's any type of socialism that can be democratic. The most democratic thing you can have is free market capitalism, because everybody gets to vote with the way they conduct themselves in society, with the way they spend their money, the way they behave, the way they approach charity. Without freedom, you cannot have democracy.
It's indispensable. Indispensable.
All right, so let's move to 27 minutes.
Winston Churchill said the destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals. And he said there's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness. We will keep in mind and remember that Barry Goldwater has faith in us. He has faith that you and I have the ability and the dignity and the right to make our own decisions and determine our own destiny. Thank you very much.
You know, I'm starved for somebody who doesn't have a phony bone in their body like that.
Okay. All right. Let's be serious here, though.
All right.
This man, Ronald Reagan, was an actor, right? There's a lot of phony bones in his body.
Okay. All right.
And I'm not claiming that he's insincere here. I really do not think he's insincere.
Yeah.
But I do think he's polished. This is the beginning of the television era, you know, like not the very beginning, but it's sort of at its infancy. It's certainly when most middle class people really started to own televisions and be able to tune in regularly. So before then, you could have an elegant wordsmith, you know, in print, and a good editor could make anyone, you know, who's not speaking publicly sound like they're coherent, even poetic. And so here, not only does he have this eloquent speech to deliver, he's also very charismatic at delivering it. I mean, he's absolutely charming. And that's what we've had ever since. That's what wins now, is the charming personality.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not trying to claim that he's insincere here. I don't think he's insincere. I do think he made some mistakes in his later career, but I think that the good he did in the world was significant. So there's a couple things that I want to go back and point out.
Oh, sure.
For one, in the first clip, he talked about there being no left or right. There's only an up or a down. Like, where we go from here is either up or it's down. And I think that's such a good way to put it. I have a really hard time defining left and right anymore. And that's sort of one of the reasons why I became a libertarian, was because, like, I don't know what left wing is, right? I'm not for stealing people's money. I'm not for forcing people to do things that they don't want to do, or buy insurance they don't want to buy. I'm not for spending uncontrollably. I'm not for, you know, waging the left's wars any more than I'm for waging the right. So how do I identify myself as a leftist if I don't believe in those leftist causes? Even though I do believe in, you know, marriage equality, and I do believe in, you know, racial equality, and I do believe in, you know, all those other things that they purport to support. so how could I define myself as a leftist that way? But on the other hand, you know, I'm not for the rights wars. I'm not for, you know, again, the left is not wrong to call the right out on the religious intolerance that was imposed on the world or on the country in the past. I think the modern right is much different, but in those past times, like the right was definitely for imposing by force Christian values. And
sodomy laws in Texas back in the early 1900s and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. So both the left and right were very pro force when it served their particular bent. So I couldn't call myself either one of those things. So, you know, so for me, this up or down revelation is just huge, you know. Where we go from here is either up or it's down, and you get to define that for yourself. Anyway, I just think it's very eloquent to put it that way. Okay, so there's one clip I did want to play.
Okay, sure. You can play Dutch clips all day as far as I know.
There's one where he says, I didn't get where exactly it was in the speech, but he says, I resent being called the masses, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like...
I don't know about you, but I've never heard the people of this country before being referred to as the masses. Yeah.
Right. It's such a way to write off everyone's individuality. Just the masses feel this way. Like, well, you know, people certainly feel differently in mobs than they do one-on-one. And I think we can see that in our modern times and the riots that we've been enduring and all that kind of stuff. You talk to people one-on-one, and nobody's going to break the window out of your house. But you get people into mobs, and they behave and believe a lot differently.
I think that's perhaps the greatest value of what we've been offering to the national discourse with our podcast over the last nearly 2 years is the overall, the Venn diagram, if you will, gist of what we're about. The main message that we're trying to get across to people: think about your freedom. Think about what it means. It makes you human. It separates you from your pet dog, and it can be lost in an instant. It was not really even thought about much until, you know, people like John Locke and Montesquieu, and then the founding fathers and so forth. It's only in the last couple of centuries that human beings have ever been able to pull themselves up out of perpetual misery, and into something happier and more convenient and more safe. And it's because we've been thinking about liberty.
And Reagan in this speech, he says, and I love this, he calls it man's long
climb from the swamp to the stars.
Yes, from the swamp to the stars. A long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's just brilliantly eloquent. Okay, so I also liked he dropped this line where he says, the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan.
And it's continued to be more true as the years since 1964 have passed.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything. Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so. Now, we're for a provision that destitution should not follow unemployment by reason of old age. And to that end, we've accepted Social Security as a step toward meeting the problem. But we're against those entrusted with this program when they practice deception regarding its fiscal shortcomings, when they charge that any criticism of the program means that we want to end payments to those people who depend on them for a livelihood. They've called it insurance to us in 100 million pieces of literature. But then they appeared before the Supreme Court and they testified it was a welfare program. They only used the term insurance to sell it to the people. And they said Social Security dues are a tax for the general use of the government. And the government has used that tax. There is no fund. Because Robert Byers, the actuarial head, appeared before a congressional committee and admitted that Social Security as of this moment is $298 billion in the hole. But he said there should be no cause for worry, because as long as they had the power to tax, they could always take away from the people whatever they needed to bail them out of trouble. And they're doing just that. A young man, 21 years of age, working at an average salary, his Social Security contribution would in the open market buy him an insurance policy that would guarantee $220 a month at age 65. The government promises $127. He could live it up until he's 31 and then take out a policy that would pay more than Social Security. Now, are we so lacking in business sense that we can't put this program on a sound basis so that people who do require those payments will find they can get them when they're due, that the cupboard isn't bare? Barry Goldwater thinks we can. At the same time, can't we introduce voluntary features that would permit a citizen who can do better on his own to be excused upon presentation of evidence that he had made provision for the non-earning years? Should we not allow a widow with children to work and not lose the benefits supposedly paid for by her deceased husband? Shouldn't you and I be allowed to declare who our beneficiaries will be under this program, which we cannot do? I think we're for telling our senior citizens that no one in this country should be denied medical care because of a lack of funds. But I think we're against forcing all citizens, regardless of need, into a compulsory government program, especially when we have such examples as was announced last week when France admitted that their Medicare program is now bankrupt. They've come to the end of the road. In addition, was Barry Goldwater so irresponsible when he suggested that our government give up its program of deliberate planned inflation so that when you do get your Social Security pension, a dollar will buy a dollar's worth and not 45 cents worth? I think we're for an international organization where the nations of the world can seek peace. But I think we're against subordinating American interests to an organization that has become so structurally unsound that today you can muster a 2/3 vote on the floor of the General Assembly among nations that represent less than 10% of the world's population. I think we're against the hypocrisy of assailing our allies because here and there they cling to a colony, while we engage in a conspiracy of silence and never open our mouths about the millions of people enslaved in the Soviet colonies in the satellite nations.
I don't know how you argue with that.
Quite frankly, I don't either, Clyde.
I mean, this is a different time, I guess. It's hard to say, like, there's so much that's different about the world between 1964 and 2020, and so much that's exactly the same. And, you know, like, you can say that about any time in human recorded history. I mean, it shows to me that the right and the Republican wing have been, they don't claim to be open to social programs anymore, but they always have been.
Yeah.
Here he's talking about being pro-Social Security, but just with good management. And I think that if they had that good management up until now, he's talking about even back then, it was insolvent because they were raiding the actual fund, right? The money that they had set aside there was gone because instead of being insurance, it was really considered a tax, so they raided the coffers for the tax to pay for pet programs, and then there's no money for the actual recipients who need it, even back then. And, I mean, you could make that same argument today, and the only reason that it is still solvent is exactly like he said, they can always go back and just pull more resources out of society and tax people even more, even though they're getting actually less for their investment, quote unquote.
And that might be the weakest point of this wonderful, magnificent speech. He's taking as a given that Social Security is permanently baked into American policy. Social Security was one of three major things that a lady named Frances Perkins, who was a central part of the FDR administration in the 30s, imposed on us. The other two being the minimum wage and unemployment insurance. And, FDR did not cook up all the aspects of the New Deal himself. They came out of people like Frances Perkins and Rexford Tugwell and a number of people who'd been cooking this stuff up for a number of years. And so, not unlike our own time, the assumption that government ought to make our lives, safe and convenient and happy, not beyond what James Madison said it should do, which is you ought to be able to walk down the street without getting knocked in the head, and evil regimes should not be able to invade our shores. Beyond that, government should not be. It's not the function of government to guarantee you a happy, safe, convenient life. But that all changed with the progressive movement and then on into the New Deal. And this Frances Perkins lady, part of that was Social Security. When people turn 65, we've got to help them make sure they can live comfortably the rest of their lives. And why did we not assume so before that?
I don't think, like, I get so much static, like, oh, you're a libertarian, okay, so taxation is theft, and, I just don't see that you would have that person who's the over-the-top libertarian that's like, all taxation is absolutely theft, and it's wrong and immoral. You're just the crony mob shaking people down for payments so that nothing bad happens because you're going to create the bad thing for them if they don't pay up, right? I don't think you'd have that guy if it wasn't for this waste, fraud, and abuse. When you take people's money for a specific reason, if all your money, you got taxed a low amount, 10, 15%, whatever, and it actually went to roads, bridges, schools, and hospitals and shit, I really don't think that you'd have people screaming.
Yeah. But and a police force. You need, like I say, you need to be able to
sure.
Feel secure when you walk down the street, walk out your door and down the streets that you're not going to get knocked in the head.
Sure, and maybe even some public infrastructure like subsidizing or creating the monopolistic water company or whatever. You're right.
Yeah.
I think the private market would eventually be better suited to deliver those services, but I don't think that I don't think that you'd have a bunch of people that are so anti-government services at a basic level. I don't think you'd have people screaming to close the post office down if they could keep the goddamn thing in the black.
Yeah. If letters coming from Missouri showed up in Indiana in a reasonable amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, right. If it wasn't that they had to rely on sucking more tax money just to keep the thing afloat, I honestly don't think people would care. And dialing this back to Reagan, my biggest critique of Reagan would be that he had Milton Friedman as an economic advisor, and so rarely took his advice. That was Friedman's complaint that he had the ear of presidents, but they so rarely.
Well, such is the nature of what happens when somebody gets to the Oval Office. And they got to factor so many things in. But of all presidents in my lifetime, I think he did a better job of factoring everything in than anybody else. He did a better job of sticking to his principles, and also he was thoroughly decent. Neither of our major choices this time around, you can't say that about either of them.
Well, I'll give you that. I think that Ronald Reagan was a much more decent man than either of the choices that we have available to us today. I don't think that a person's character decency necessarily means that they are a better or worse leader. I think I think it helps to have a person of good character, but I also think that it goes both ways. I think too strong of a character sometimes can make people soft, and
I think maybe that was some of Jimmy Carter's problem.
Jimmy Carter is exactly the example, maybe the only example I can come up with. Yeah. And God bless Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is a great man. He's a wonderful man. He was a terrible president, but a wonderful man. I honestly I want to talk more about Reagan. Maybe we should do a follow-up show.
Okay.
Because we talked about a couple of people offline. We talked about Ron Paul, and we talked a little bit more in depth personally than we talked on the show. and we talked about his link with Lou Rockwell and Pat Buchanan, and we've talked about Ronald Reagan, and there's a lot of these people that I really don't know their histories so in depth. I get that there's a lot of criticism about these people, but I don't actually know the specifics of those things. I understand that there's an argument for and against them, but I don't really know the facts.
Historian that I am, I have a master's degree in it. I think it's very important to view people biographically and look at how they came by their views and whether they were sincere or phony in sticking with them and acting upon them. And I think that stuff is very important to research and know about. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe at some point another anniversary will come around, and maybe we should do a whole Reagan show and figure out,
Well, I'll tell you.
All the good and bad.
January 2021 will be the 110th anniversary of Ronald Reagan's birth. Yeah, maybe we'll do a little special episode or something. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. Let's put that one in the books.
All right. Okay. Clyde,
okay.
What do you
This
think?
has been a long one, but I got to tell you, Barney, we got a little behind in our shows, and I've really missed hanging out with you, and I've really missed doing our podcast.
Same here.
I'm really glad we got to catch up again, and I think this has been a great episode, and I really appreciate your insight into everything we've talked about today.
And likewise, and I really think that if anybody watches it attentively, they will be spurred to think about their freedom, what it means, and how precious it is, and what life would look like if they didn't have it.
And one thing you don't have freedom about is clicking the subscribe button. That's not a choice.
Yeah, you must do that.
You must do that. You must like and share our content. You must quote us. You must share. You must promote. And one thing is voluntary. You can go to patreon.com/Barney and Clyde, and you can contribute there. You can become a contributing member. We try to make a little extra content for that. We've been a little bit of slackers on that front, but if you actually do pay us, you will see more of that stuff. So
You bet.
please do that. And in the meantime, Barney,
Stay vigilant about your freedom.
see you in a fortnight.
Well, that's an interesting development.